The replay didn't lie. Nobody in that press box, nobody in that dugout, nobody watching from any angle that the cameras provided could look at what happened and find a different explanation for it. There was no ambiguity to reach for. There was no generous interpretation available that would have changed the essential nature of what had occurred on that field between Bobby Witt Jr. and Shohei Ohtani. It happened in front of everyone. And then the consequences arrived. Baseball has its own language for physical confrontations. A language built over more than a century of men competing at the highest level under the particular pressures that the sport applies, the failures that are public, the successes that are temporary, the frustrations that accumulate across a long season until something that should have stayed internal finds its way out into the open. The sport has seen bench-clearing brawls. It has seen brushback pitches that crossed lines. It has seen hard slides and high tags and the thousand small aggressions that live in the gray area between fierce competition and something uglier. What happened between Bobby Witt Jr. and Shohei Ohtani did not live in the gray area. To understand the moment, you need to understand the game that preceded it. The Royals had been playing with something to prove. Kansas City in this particular stretch of the season was not a team content to occupy the middle ground of the standings and wait for circumstances to improve. They were playing with an edge that their younger players, and Bobby Witt Jr. most prominently among them, carried onto the field every night like something they had packed deliberately before leaving the clubhouse. Witt is not an ordinary young player. He is the kind of talent that arrives in a generation and announces itself before anyone has fully prepared a vocabulary for what they are watching. The range. The arm. The bat speed that makes pitchers who face him for the first time recalibrate everything they thought they knew about the current state of the sport. He is 24 years old and already plays like someone who has already figured out most of what baseball will ask of him. But talent and temperament are different things. And on this particular evening, his temperament failed him. The play developed the way these plays always develop in retrospect, slowly enough that you can see every moment that led to the one that mattered, quickly enough that none of the people involved had time to make a different choice. Ohtani was on the base path. He had reached first on a well-worked at-bat, the kind of patient, deliberate plate appearance that reflects the preparation he brings to every game regardless of the opponent, regardless of the score, regardless of the particular pressures the evening has placed on the situation. He had been watching the pitcher carefully. He had been calculating. When the ball was hit, he moved. What happened at the base involved contact. That much is not in dispute by anyone. The dispute, if it can be called that, given what the cameras showed, was about the nature of that contact. About whether it fell within the boundaries of hard baseball play or crossed into something the sport's rules exist specifically to prevent. The MLB office reviewed the footage. They were not ambiguous in their conclusion. Bobby Witt Jr. made contact with Ohtani in a manner that the league determined was intentional, excessive, and outside the parameters of what competitive play requires or permits. The statement from the league office used careful, institutional language, the kind of language that organizations reach for when they need precision more than drama. But underneath the careful language, the message was clear. What Witt did was not baseball. 3 games. That was the suspension. 3 games removed from a Kansas City lineup that could not easily absorb his absence, delivered without the option of immediate appeal while the process ran its course. 3 games that would sit on his record and follow him through every subsequent conversation about who Bobby Witt Jr. is as a player and as a professional. The Royals organization released a statement. It said the appropriate things in the appropriate order. It expressed respect for the league's process. It indicated that Witt accepted responsibility for his actions. It used the word unfortunate several times in ways that left unclear exactly what was being described as unfortunate, the incident itself, the suspension, or the situation generally. It did not fully satisfy anyone. Shohei Ohtani did not hold a press conference. This is consistent with who he is. He does not reach for the microphone when the microphone is not necessary. He does not perform his reactions for audiences that are waiting to receive them. He processes things in the private way of a man who has learned that the most powerful responses are often the ones that are never publicly delivered. But the people around him spoke. Dave Roberts spoke with the measured fury of a manager who had watched something happen to one of his players and was now being asked to contain his response within the boundaries that his professional position required. He succeeded. Mostly. But the edges of what he felt were visible to anyone paying attention. He said that the league had reviewed the situation and reached a conclusion and that he respected the process. He said that his concern was entirely for Ohtani's physical condition and that he was grateful the injury had not been more significant. He said that baseball is a physical game and that physical games sometimes produce physical moments that exceed what anyone would want. Then he said something that was not in the prepared remarks. Something that arrived in the silence after the official language had been delivered and before the next question came. He said, "There are ways to compete hard and there are ways to compete that go beyond hard. Everyone in this sport knows the difference. Everyone saw the difference last night." He did not say Witt's name. He didn't need to. Clayton Kershaw was asked about it in the way that reporters ask Kershaw about things, with the understanding that his answer will carry the particular authority of a man who has been inside this game long enough to speak about it without performance. He did not minimize what had happened. He did not reach for the traditional baseball language about hard play and competitive fire that sometimes gets deployed to soften the edges of moments that don't deserve to be softened. He said that what he had seen did not reflect the standards of the sport. That the sport has standards. That those standards exist for reasons. That the reasons have to do with the basic understanding between competitors that there are lines, and that crossing them has consequences, and that the consequences exist because the lines matter. He said one more thing. He said that Shohei Ohtani handles things the way he handles things, with a composure that other people in the same situation might not be capable of, and that the people around him are not always equally capable of that composure on his behalf. He left that hanging in the air. The reporters in the room understood what he meant. Bobby Witt Jr. spoke. He did not hide. Whatever else can be said about what he did on that field, his response in its aftermath reflected at minimum the understanding that disappearing was not an option and that silence would be interpreted as indifference. He stood in front of the microphone with the particular discomfort of a young man who has done something he cannot undo and is now being asked to account for it publicly while the footage plays on a loop on every screen in the building. He said he made a mistake. He said it directly and without the elaborate scaffolding of justification that these statements sometimes arrive wrapped in. He did not explain the competitive pressure of the moment. He did not reference the score or the inning or the circumstances that had preceded the play. He said he made a mistake and that it was not who he wanted to be as a player or as a person. He said he had reached out to Ohtani. He did not describe the nature of that outreach. He did not say whether contact had been made or whether a response had been received. He offered it simply as information, as evidence that he understood the scope of what had happened extended beyond the official channels of a league suspension. The room received it carefully. Not warmly. Not coldly. Carefully. The way rooms receive statements that are necessary without being sufficient. Ohtani was back at the park the following day. This is also consistent with who he is. The world had spent 36 hours generating opinions about what had happened to him and what it meant and what should follow from it. He had spent those 36 hours preparing for the next game. He took batting practice with the focused, unhurried energy that has become his signature. He moved through his preparation with the same deliberate intention that he brings to every preparation regardless of what has surrounded it. He answered one question from one reporter about his physical condition. He said he was fine, and then redirected his attention to the work in front of him. The work in front of him was baseball. It was always baseball. Bobby Witt Jr. served his 3 games. He returned to the Kansas City lineup without ceremony, the way suspended players always return, quietly, through the side door of a Tuesday night lineup card, hoping that the game itself will eventually provide the context that words cannot. He is still one of the finest young players in the sport. That remains true. What also remains true is what happened on that field. What the cameras showed. What the league concluded. What Kershaw left hanging in the air of that press room with the particular precision of a man who chooses his words the way he once chose his pitches. Some things in baseball fade. Some things follow you. Bobby Witt Jr. will find out which kind this is. The sport is long. There is time to discover the answer.